Alrighty, folks, welcome. I hope you are able to connect with us without any trouble. My name is Cole. I'm one of the residents here at William Beaumont Army Medical Center, Texas Tech, University El Paso, Ortho Residency. And thanks a lot for taking a few minutes here to listen to us talk a little bit just about the application process. I know it's kind of a stressful time of year, and we were all kind of in your shoes once, and our goal is just to help, give you a little reassurance, like to make sure, you're doing the right things, and then just to help, offer our own insights from our experiences to try to help you during this really, important, exciting, but very stressful time. So I'm one of the third-year residents here. We have a couple other residents around that'll chime in as we talk over some things to give their input, and then I'll let Chris kind of take it away, who's going to kick us off here.
Yeah, hey guys. I'm Chris. I'm one of the second-year civilian residents. So it's good to meet you all, I got a quick talk kind of going over the civilian side of the house, what the application's like. Let's see, I can't see. Have you pulled it up, Cole?
Yeah, I'll start sharing it now.
Okay, cool. Again, originally from Austin, went to med school down in San Antonio as one of their civilian counterparts at UH. Ended up here for residency. Couldn't be happier. Just kind of give a quick overview of what it's like going through ERAS. Mostly applies to the civilian applicants, but also there are a couple civilian deferment spots for the military this year. So it's useful information to know how this application works, kind of all the things that go through it. I think it's the next slide. Yeah, perfect. So this is probably the most important thing that you should commit to your mind now if you're thinking about ERAS. It's your timeline, it's your applications. Maybe you don't have all the details locked in, but you should at least know when things are due and when you need to have things finalized by. The 2024 ERAS cycle began on June 7th, which is when I believe you could first enter into the portal and start messing around with things, starting playing with your profile. On September 6th, you can begin certifying and sending your applications to programs beginning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. This is not when you can start editing things, but this is actually when you can finalize stuff and send it, which I think was kind of confusing when I was going through the application cycle. I would recommend having everything done nice and tidied up by September 5th. It looks kind of good. It looks pretty good to programs if you're able to send things earlier in the cycle, as opposed to, at midnight when they finalize things on the 27th. Just kind of helps you get your name out there quicker if your civilian cycle is something you're interested in. And then the next page.
And all the Army ortho applicants should be aware there are 2 Army-sponsored ortho spots. And so to whatever degree you feel comfortable with, you should be applying to ERAS. Now, there is just 2 out of the total of 22, so it's a small number, but for those spots, it's all through ERAS, and you can't find out, after you match that you matched to the civilian spot and then start ERAS. It's too late. So you have to almost play both of these at once and juggle these simultaneous applicancy timelines, which is kind of frustrating at times, but there's really no way around it, really.
Yeah. So as far as for preparing for how to actually fill out your application, specifically ERAS, I think the best way to do it is to know, update, and love your CV. Your CV is going to be the backbone of your application. It's what makes you who you are, tells us what type of student you are, what interests you, and ultimately it's what's kind of guided your decisions and why you're here now. Know it, use it, love it, update it all the time. I'm still bad at updating it all the time, but I should do it more often. Letters of recommendation, critical. Ask physicians that you have directly worked with and who you think will write you a unique letter. Obviously, you'll have to get one from your program director, chair of whatever institution you're at, but you should also get one from someone that you've worked with for an extended period of time. Someone who knows you and can write you something that stands out from the crowd, per se. I would be pretty specific on how you ask for your letter. Don't say, hey, you're going to write me a bad one, but say, hey, are you able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? And if they say no, don't try to push it, but maybe turn this into a feedback situation where you say, oh, okay, can you give me some feedback on how I can improve? And then that's a good way to learn for yourself and then go impress somebody else on it. And then your personal statements. I think this is probably the hardest part of your application. Very few people enjoy bragging about themselves, and that's normal. Just speak from your heart, be genuine, paint yourself in a good light. Someone once told me that, my old advisor said 10% help, 10% hurt, and roughly 80% are just fine. Ultimately, you just don't want to be in that hurt position. So just make sure you paint yourself in a good light, you're honest with it, and it's something you can talk about. So ERAS is broken up into a bunch of different sections. The first sections of the application are pretty consistent with every application you've ever filled out, from med school, undergrad, anything. It focuses on basic information, your demographic information. They'll ask you to connect, your USMLE profile, your NBME profile, so they can access your test scores. They ask you about your languages you speak, your educational backgrounds. Something I found kind of confusing is they ask you to enter your NRMP, your resident match panel information. This is not how you register for the match if you're a civilian. This is just how you link your profile. So this is what it looks like on ERAS. It says, are you interested in being in the match, which everyone should do if you're doing a civilian application. And you say, if yes, you enter your ID. That way they know they're able to link your match profile with your actual application profile, and programs know who you are when they rank you. Geographic preferences is something new. I didn't actually fill this out, or it wasn't available when I was there. If I understand what it's saying, you can highlight 3 areas in the United States, and programs within that census or that area will be alerted that you are interested in being in that geographic area, but no one else can see those preferences, and no other programs outside of that area are alerted to your preferences, if that makes sense. On to the next section. So, your experiences are really the most important part of your application. For some reason, I didn't think was limited when I applied, but right now it says you can enter 10 of your most meaningful experiences, and these can be from anything. These should be things that make you you. They should be things you could talk about for hours on end if you're asked for during an interview. They don't have to be super technical or complex. Consider things outside of medicine, things you've been involved with that gotten you excited. Obviously, have a few things that are science related, technical, but make sure you show your humanity as well. I found that I got most of my questions during interviews on this section, and the majority were not about medical related things or science related things. They were about mentorship programs that I was involved with, or some service projects I did around San Antonio and why I did them. And so those are important to involve and kind of help the interviewer relate to you in a way that's not just basic science. Again, just be honest, be excited about the things in this section, put your best foot forward. This is where it's fun to brag about yourself. These are the cool things you've done throughout undergrad and med school that make you the applicant that you are. And you can keep going. The next section focuses on impactful experiences. This is not your personal statement. This is kind of sort of a weird section. You're talking about essentially any sort of drastic event or dramatic event that might have happened to you during med school, or something that makes you have a unique experience, and how that sets you apart or might be something that impacted your medical school experience. Not everyone will have something to put in this place, and that's okay. If you have something, feel free to add it, but also don't just make something up or fill it in to fill it in. It's okay to leave this blank. Then you'll go through some generic questions about your work, and then everybody's favorite section, the publication section. So I got its own slide on there. This section is broken down into a ton of categories. I think sometimes it's hard to decipher what sections to put work in. I also think this section is what causes a lot of artificial inflating of the numbers you see when they talk about residency applications. Essentially, you should consider this section as something that you're proud of and can talk about easily if someone were to ask you a question on it. I think it's easiest to consider the sections in a tiered sort of manner, where peer-reviewed articles and abstracts are the most robust, quickly followed by a book chapter if you happen to have one of those. And then the tiers sort of drop off from there. But that's not to say that if there's nothing in those sections you haven't done, that you shouldn't put them. Definitely be sure to include any sort of poster presentations you've done at your med school, any sort of conferences you've done anywhere. And if you have a peer review article that you published and then you presented at a national convention, include it in both sections. Consider oral presentations as anything you've given during grand rounds, during third-year rotations, or fourth-year sub-internships. They might have felt small and meaningless in the moment, but the presentations you worked on, they're things that you're proud of, and you should make sure that people know that you know how to present in front of a group. I don't know if the animation came through, but there was an animation on the slide. It shows a graph of the number of experiences. Essentially, these are just skyrocketed throughout the years. But I think it's important to take this with a grain of salt. You'll have people that list every single time they presented a poster for a case study at every single conference they've ever done in their life as an experience. And so all of a sudden, this one poster that they have written and presented becomes 40 experiences. So it's important to realize, hey, maybe it's okay to just put this one time I did this thing at this really cool convention and then leave it alone. you know. But also if you presented it at a couple national conventions, put that, but you don't need to necessarily put it every time you presented it at your own home institution or school for a grand rounds or presentations like that. I think it's okay to do it if you've done it for like one research day, but just be wary because people will look through that and see through that. And then on to the next one. So the last section on ERAS is new to the game. Something also that was not available when I was there. It's called signaling, and essentially it gives some control back to you as medical students and applicants to tell programs that you're interested in. For orthopedics, you can tell 30 programs that you're interested in them, and it sends a big old flag to them and says this person is very interested. I'd be careful, sending them just to big name programs because inevitably thousands of people are going to send them to, the Rushes of the world and Emory of the world. But if there's a program that you find unique, it's smaller, and you're excited about it, send them a flag, and that flag will stand out. That's kind of my thoughts on it. And then next one. So the last little section of navigating ERAS is your documents section, which I think is also kind of confusing. I would treat this like a Google Drive, essentially. You can upload as many personal statements as you want. You can upload them under unique names. You can tailor them to programs. And then you essentially assign them to the programs that you want to send them to. So pay attention, make sure that you're assigning the right personal statement to the right program, getting it delivered to the right spot. But this is a good way to set yourself up in a unique sort of way. Your transcripts also go in this section. Your school should pretty much handle all of that along with your dean letter. You just have to make sure that when you're certifying your application, you say, send my transcripts and send my dean letter. And then the last part is your letters of recommendation also get uploaded into this document section. Ask for them early, ask for them honestly. The ERAS system, you put your writer's name and email in there, and it sends them a unique profile to upload to your profile. Waive your right to read it just because it looks suspicious if you don't. And then assign your letters of recommendation, and be careful on this. Some programs have ways of weeding people out early. If they ask for 3, send them 3. Don't send them 4. If they ask for 2, send them 2. Don't send them 3. So just make sure you're paying attention to what your programs require. And we can keep going. Last step is certification. That's just saying everything's true and accurate, and then you essentially send it off. Your application fee is based off of how many programs you send it to. So your first 10 are included in your $99 application fee, and then it sort of incrementally goes up for 10 after that. You can kind of see the next 10 are $19 each, the next 10 are $23 each, and then the next 10 and so on are $27 each. So it can get pretty expensive pretty quick. But I think it's worth it applying for programs that you are actually interested in and could see yourself going to. A couple resources on the next slide. The AAMC website is actually pretty stinking good for how to fill out ERAS. Kind of breaks everything down really nicely for you. Gives you all your timelines. There's worksheets on there that help you fill out the sections, general questions. Always go to your dean of student affairs at your schools. They're pretty knowledgeable of this stuff. They know what program directors are looking for. Talk to graduates from last year. Talk to residents you have good relationships with at your hospital. They're all good brains to pick and kind of ask how to tailor your application. And then the last little section. So just to drive everybody kind of crazy, the match registration is a completely separate organization with its own website. The registration process and fees and timelines are all completely separate. Your school should provide you with a token for registration of the match, which begins on September 15th. You have to complete it by January 31st. Match registration, pretty straightforward. They ask a few demographic questions. They make sure that you're who you are. And then it's a $70 fee, which includes your ability to rank your first 20 programs. If you end up being able or wanting to rank more than 20, it's an extra $30 per program. If you're late registering, it's an additional $50 fee. Ranking comes around in February. You'll have interviews prior to that that you'll drive yourself crazy over. You'll drive yourself crazy over your rank list. Try to go with your gut, feel right about it, and then submit your rank list overall. Match weeks in March, it's crazy, fun, stressful time, but it's something that's been done forever. It's a good time. And then if you hit the next button, this is an actual visual of what the match website looks like. So this is not completely separate from ERAS. This is where you log in. This is where you register. Just make sure that you populate your profile into that section on ERAS as well, which is the next little section, little animation in there. And then that's all I got.
Awesome. Thanks
Chris,
so much for going over that. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I joined late, so I don't know if you mentioned this, Chris, when you were talking about letters of rec, but I know they started it when I was applying through ERAS. Some programs, be careful when you're applying. They may require this like standardized ortho letter of rec. That's not just like a straight normal letter of rec. It's more akin to like EM's like slow like evaluation letter of rec. So just be careful because you may have to send like one of your letter writers that for certain programs.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's not something military does, but in the civilian world, they do that, and you should definitely be aware of that. It's kind of a standardized way of doing things. So with that, now we'll kind of dive into a little bit more of the weeds of the military matching process. We don't have a, Nobel Prize winning algorithm. It's a much more sort of human, bare bones, sending emails in and out to make these decisions, which can sometimes be kind of frustrating and confusing, which you may have already felt or may be feeling right now. So, this is different than matching in the regular civilian world. Like there are, like 800 or something regular civilian spots that most of your classmates are familiar with, unless you're coming from USIS. And there are, I don't know, on any given year, like 100 or so total, maybe a little bit more Army residency spots available. So it's a just tiny pool. And so a lot of people can't really relate. And so it's hard finding information about it. And this isn't necessarily going to cover everything, but hopefully some questions you may have had, questions you haven't known to ask. So, broadly speaking, it's still a matching process, meaning, you have this application, you visit programs on certain rotations, and you submit your application, submit your preferences, and then find out, when you match. However, it's less of a blind process since it's such a small pool. In the Army, there's like 7 training sites compared to the, 170 or whatever on the civilian side. So, the perk of that is there are fewer training locations to familiarize yourself with. You have a better chance of visiting a larger, share of those. As a result, you want to make sure when you do visit these for rotations, or previously people used to visit for like interviews for like weekend or something. No one really does that anymore, but you want to try your best to perform well to not only impress that program, but so that program also thinks well of you when it comes time to select Army placement of residents at large, because that's kind of really the bucket you want to make. The military will decide first who is matching, and then they'll split them up based off where they're going. So you could have a program that loves you, but if you don't make that first cut of just overall matching, then it doesn't matter. So you want to perform well everywhere you go, even if you come to find like week 2 while you're there, it's not the place for you. And so you may or may not have the option to apply through ERAS. This is specific to what I think I was mentioning in the chat. This depends on sort of having the ability to apply for a civilian sponsored spot. Essentially, the reason for that is the Army has a need for more surgeons than they have the capacity to train, given their military training facilities and ACGME accreditations. And so they pay to fund your training in an orthopedic surgery residency at a civilian residency, any residency that you match at. Now, the twist is you have to match there, and you, as Chris told us, find out in March when that is. However, the process is ongoing like now. In the military, you find out in mid-December where you go, and so you can't exactly find out you have been selected for a civilian sponsored spot in mid-December and then start your ERAS application. And so because of that, it's in your best interest to also apply through ERAS. Now, there are 2 spots, and some people are not as invested in those. I know some people in my class even who applied to sort of the like just 10 free programs because you had to apply through ERAS. I just pretended like I was just applying through ERAS like everybody else, and I, spent all this money on different things. And then I found out I matched in the Army, and then I just said to any pending interviews that I had, I said, sorry, I found out I matched in the Army. That's it for me. So I hope that clears up a little bit of sort of like the civilian selected spot and why ERAS is still pertinent to military applicants. Not every year has a civilian sponsored spot, but on those that do, if you are selected for a civilian sponsored spot and you haven't done ERAS, well, then you basically just like lost your spot. And it's happened before, and more the result of folks not having the information to work with, around this time of the year. So I hope that doesn't catch anyone off guard. But in general, mods, this is everyone's best friend. It's this website from, I don't know, like the beginning of the internet, where you may have seen this logo to log in. I don't think it's ever changed, but this is where you'll find your information. They have their links to certain drop-down information regarding application materials. First and foremost, know your deadlines. So 31 August is when your application materials are due to be uploaded. And then 15 October is when your rank list is due. I don't know how it is working this year, if it's changed. It's been a couple years since I've gone through this process. However, this was a firm 31 August deadline for application materials. They didn't allow anyone to upload things late. It's like ERAS in that regard. And then my rank list I sent to somebody's email at like one of the Army sort of like medical human resources kind of department. So it was like a Microsoft Excel like rank list, which is kind of funny, but it may or may not have changed since then. And then after that, match day itself is usually middle of December. So I think it was like the 15th my year or something. So it's an accelerated timeline compared to the civilian counterparts, which in a way it's more stressful because everything's happening a little bit faster, but also, hopefully you get some good news and then you're basically coasting for the last like 6 months of med school, which is pretty nice. And then the sections in here. So once you go, I think it's one of these bullet points down here. If you have not gotten on this website, it's in your best interest to try to get on this quickly to know exactly what you're dealing with, because this is, what your application will consist of, and it's not as easy or user-friendly as ERAS. So you have to be on a military-enabled computer. Where I went to med school, I didn't have access to that, right? I was at a civilian med school and it was hard to find. But you probably have a, ID card, like a CAC card, and there are these CAC readers available that you have to kind of search the internet on how to install the certificates that allow you to access these secure military websites. But it's all in your best interest to try to do that, because you need to get on this website to see the application materials, to be able to upload yours and to perform this application, because I didn't know that was an option. I basically scrambled to try to find some place where I could get on a military computer to do this. And that's just more stress than you need to put yourself through. So do whatever you can to have access to this at home, and your life will be a lot easier. But the sections of that, kind of like what Chris was saying, it's not as, I think, extensive as ERAS, which is kind of nice, right? You don't have to think of all your experiences or your meaningful experiences, or who to give a gold star to on your resident, all these small kind of tasks, but it is kind of basics. But it's a lot of biographical info. But the things that are the same are your personal statement, and unlike ERAS, you're just going to have one personal statement, so don't tailor it specifically towards one location. And then one thing that you may or may not have trouble with is as far as uploading your educational kind of history. Some places you need official transcript or something, and it has to be sent to a certain person. So you want to know about that in advance, so you can let your student affairs office know, or order a secured electronic diploma from your college to be sent to the email address on file on this mod's website. These little details just to check these boxes to get through it. And then of course the other things that matter too, letter of recommendation, and the personal statement. You're not going to have multiple different ones that you kind of select and send to one or two places. You are going to have an X number. I don't know what the requirement is. I think it's up to a certain number, maybe up to 4 or 5, but a minimum of 3, if I remember correctly, but it could have changed, and everyone will see those. Okay. So having a computer and then knowing what these tabs are really key. One thing that does make it difference is that you can enter any work history, but also military history. And so these things all matter in the application. And people with military history, they kind of get acknowledgement for that. It doesn't necessarily mean they will match because of that, or you will be at a worse chance of matching because you don't have that. Most people who go through this don't have any sort of prior Army experience, but some do. Everyone comes from different backgrounds, just there's non-traditional med students and things like that. So that's, kind of something that sets it apart. And your letters of recommendation, just like Chris was saying, try to get meaningful ones. Try to get some when you do audition rotations. You should have Army sponsored ADT rotations, or even be able to do more than that on a kind of pay as you go format. So try to get some from those rotations, because those will, carry some weight. The Army community of orthopedic surgeons is fairly small, and people will be able to tell pretty quickly if someone has asked for, an authentic, good, like, letter of recommendation from someone in their own community, and that'll, make a difference. So what comes with that is, try to, again, do well in your rotations, ask people early for a good rotation, and be responsive to their needs, but also hold them accountable to make that letter of recommendation for you. I wouldn't let too much time pass between the end of your rotation and having them send that letter. More than likely, they will send it directly via email to the point of contact for the Army residency application. They may not be, sent a code to upload it on your behalf to MODS. MODS is like not advanced system at all, like a lot of the things in the Army. And so it's just something to kind of know about. And then you'll have an advisor, and it's like someone you can ask like a bunch of these questions, but they aren't necessarily known. So I think when I did it, they were like based off like your last name or something like that, but it should be listed on the MODS website, and you should definitely get in contact with them. They probably have a phone number. I called mine like a whole lot, and they had, varying degrees of being able to help me. But at any rate, if you have questions, it's something you definitely want to get in touch with, like, throughout the process. Just making sure, like, hey, I uploaded this thing, I can't tell if it's there or not. Can you like confirm that it's there? Because you may not get like these messages or like this happy green check mark, like your application is complete when everything's done. But obviously it's very important, and you don't want to accidentally have an incomplete application, and then September 1 rolls around, you can't edit things, your application's incomplete. So just keeping these things in mind so that you're doing everything you need to do. Because I mean, really on your minds right now is like, okay, I'm trying to do really well on these rotations, but in the back of your mind, you're sort of like, I need to get, this application kind of put together so that it's ready to send out, so I can, get these, interviews done and set myself up for success. So that's kind of what this is all about, really. And then, so afterwards, so all things are said and done, you've done your application, you've gotten that on time, you've done an interview. So unlike ERAS, ERAS, the programs, they decide who they're going to interview. Like every program basically has 100-to-1 or more ratio of applicants to open positions. And so they just cannot interview all the people that apply. However, in the military, you should be interviewing at every one of the military sites. There's only I think 6 or 7 of them. And so there should be a point of contact, and I'll show you ours here in a minute, but there should be a point of contact for you to set those up, and programs will have their own format. Generally it's something like this, like a Zoom interview where you talk to either a resident like myself or the program director or a couple people, but usually it's like a half an hour kind of get to know you type of session. Most that I've taken part of are pretty informal. They'll just ask you about yourself, about the experience you've had on the interview trail, and sort of give you their pitch about why they think their program's great, and you can kind of ask them questions about it. It's usually not an extremely stressful experience, but you want to make sure you're setting them up properly in a timely fashion, and every program will kind of have their own way about going about it. But then after you've made your application, you got your letters in, everything is submitted correctly, you do the interviews. Now you get to do some of your own reflection to make your rank list. So in ERAS, you have possibly dozens of places that you'll be ranking, but the military is not that many. And so how to do that, I think just starting with like number 1 is probably the best way to go. You could also weed out places that you really don't want to go, and just kind of put them at the bottom of the list, and then you can figure out the order later. But really figuring out where you like best is I think the best place to start. Keeping in mind, matching just overall is the thing that matters the most. But if you match where you want to go, that's even better, and that's what you should be shooting for. And I would recommend most just basing this off of your personal experience. You're probably not going to get the chance to personally experience everywhere you go to, but you should take into account where you have gone and what you liked about it, as well as sort of your impressions of other places that you kind of hear secondhand. I think a good resource is, the residents where you rotate at, the attendings of the places where you rotate at, because they themselves have gone through residency, usually at a couple of different places. And so using your personal experience on your rotation is probably the best place to start, really. Like, where did I rotate? Did I rotate, El Paso or Walter Reed or Madigan or San Antonio, wherever? Like, did I like it there? Okay, great. Or like, would you see yourself being happy there? Like, that's what I often ask myself. And beyond that, did the residents I work with, did they seem happy there? Like all these things, because if you're going to match there, you're going to be a resident there. And if you, think it was cool now because you got to see some sweet trauma cases the whole time, while, the residents were, working their tails off in some back corner office, like Chris is doing right now. Just kidding. But, just be aware of those things, because your experience as a med student there may or may not match up with the experience that residents have. And so knowing kind of truly what programs are all about is important. And usually when you're there for a couple weeks, 4 weeks, preferably, you're able to kind of tell that. And so that's why your personal experience is, I think, your best source of information. But really, I think doing some reflection, knowing your values, what matters the most to you, helped guide me and probably some other people as well. So I, had some like family kind of like factors at play. And so, while you want to kind of go to a place where you feel like you'll get the best education, everywhere will probably have good education, right? Everywhere is going to graduate likely board certified orthopedic surgeons, which is sort of like, the standard, right? And so that is somewhat comforting, right? And because everyone will get to the finish line. And so then how you get there is kind of why you want to, make the rank list in the order you want, to try to match the program that fits you and your values the best. So, for some people, it's just simple as like location. Do you want to live close to family or whatever? Does your family, significant other have certain employment like conditions? That was kind of my situation. And then, things like culture, like residency culture, how close are they? What is the structure of the residency? And, some other things that are especially important in ERAS, but to a degree in the military as well. Are there certain career opportunities you think you'll be set up for success for at one program versus another? Like, so I went to med school in the Midwest at Cincinnati, and there's a couple, most like big academic civilian residencies, they're going to have kind of a stalwart, top guy of their field and certain things. And so there are a couple big names of a certain, subspecialty. And so if you know that about yourself, like, oh, I'm really interested in hand or spine or something like that, like, and you can kind of focus on that. Like, I want to go to a place where they're going to help cultivate that interest and set me up for my future, not only as an orthopedic surgeon, but as a, prospective this specialist too. So that's just something to keep in mind, that can play a factor there. Talking with your co-rotators, other medical students, you probably interacted with them now, but there's a lot of you out there and they've all had their own experiences. Granted, hearing things secondhand, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, but some information is better than no information. And especially if you spend some time with people, you get to know them pretty well about trusting their judgment on things, which can be useful, really. And then asking residents questions, super helpful. They made their own decisions about their own rank lists in the past. And so asking them what they prioritize can at least help you think about it more yourself. Then once you kind of have that list, 1 through 7 or whatever, then you can reach out to maybe your top option or top couple of options. More than likely, someone from one of those programs will also reach out to you. It's like pretty common, at least in the military setting. In the civilian setting, not so much, just because the volume is just so incredibly large. But in the military setting, if you had a place that you really enjoyed being at, it's, I think, totally appropriate to say closer to that, October 15th timeline, like, hey, this is where I'm at, follow up, ask them some more questions. Definitely after you've kind of seen everywhere and you're thinking like seriously about this, what you liked and didn't like. But asking residents their feedback on sort of, what they thought of you, if there was like a mutual fit. It's not expected by any means to do this, and no one should just directly ask you what is your like rank list order, because you don't want to like introduce bias. You don't want to like be put to a position where you're forced to say, actually, no, like you're not my, top option. And, it's like super awkward for anyone. And you will in no way be penalized or be held against you for saying like, yeah, I had a great experience. I, thought it was a good program and I'll definitely keep it in mind. Like people aren't going to fault you for that at all. Like, so don't try to get stressed out about like telling people you might not be my, number one program. I mean, you only get one of them, right? So on the other hand, if like your heart is set on this one place or whatever, it can be beneficial to reach out to this place and say, I just want to let you know, I've, made my rank list and I think you guys are like my top option. And that, can work in your favor if certain folks, if you had a good rotation there, if they know you're really interested in the program, especially, in like the military, there's going to be this list of people who match. And to a degree, you want people to match at places where they want to go, and knowing where you want to go can kind of help facilitate that. Not that it influences necessarily the lists that programs then rank about you, but the residents do help create that list. And if we know your interests, we can help advocate for residents, especially ones who've rotated with us. So that's just something to keep in mind, because the rank list is, important. Even numbers 3 and 4 can be places where you match, so you don't know. I kind of spent a ton of time on that, but we're almost to the end here. And this is from mods. So if you have not been able to access mods, this is just their, PGY1 positions for your class. So you can see here, I've highlighted orthopedics. And so you can see based on the different locations that there are like, 22 total spots, 2 of which are civilian. And then the others are split up, it's between 2 and 4 each place. And so we have 4, so which is the most, which is awesome. And then in the next couple of years we're probably going to have a 5th, but there are this many places, and so you can just use that, keep that in mind, like the total number of spots you've already like probably set up like your rotations at these places, but this is kind of what you're working with. And it's divided up however many people apply. And so unlike the civilian match where you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of people apply, the fluctuation in size of applicants changes like year to year within the Army. And previously there were like PowerPoints that came out that said like number of applicants for spots, and it's like all over the place. Usually, I mean, almost always there's more applicants than spots, but like whether it's like 30 applicants or 40 or 50, like is year to year, it varies. And so it's hard to know. You may know based off just rotating with certain people, but some years it's just tougher. Some years there are fewer people applying, but it just varies year to year. But the only thing that does change is the civilian number. Sometimes it's none. This year it's 2. Okay. And so that'll be one of the things you can rank. So you'll rank these programs, and then you'll also rank civilian sponsored. So that doesn't, pertain to a specific civilian program. It's just civilian sponsored. Okay. So that can, if that's a very high interest of yours, you can, rank that option higher. I hope I explained that okay enough. And so kind of with that, I just want to go over some of the questions you guys have that you sent in, and feel free, my other residents here, to pitch in here as well. So how much volunteer hours are average for like an application? How important are they? I would say, I don't think anywhere has to like list how many like volunteer hours, like a log. Correct me if I'm wrong, if Chris or Max, you remember, but I think just listing, the organizations you have volunteered at, and how important are they? It's like a bullet point, right? So it's like all these experiences. And I think, it is in your best interest. Anything that is remotely an experience, you should list that, right? Like it's kind of fluff, but I don't think you should, go out on like a single weekend and then you're like, okay, look, I volunteer at this place, and then now I'm like listening it on my application. People probably kind of see right through that. But how important are they? Every program has their own like weight to what things matter a lot, what things don't. And ultimately it's kind of how you present yourself as a, whatever, well-rounded person. And they can then get to know kind of with interviews. But I don't think there's a certain like number to shoot for, and like volunteering is good to do, right? It's like kind of one of those extracurriculars that are good. But like, importance, every program has their own sort of importance. Like, previously it was like, what's your like step 1 score? Now that's gone, right? But people still have, I think, for the time being, step 2 scores, right? So that is important. Or like you were in this whatever quartile of your class, or you were like an AOA inductee, like those are things that are like pretty important. And then how many like research publications. Obviously Chris said you can kind of fudge that a little bit to your favor, but those are also seen as important. And I would say volunteer hours are probably not as important as any of those things, but they probably matter some, just like leadership positions in medical school, or even before that, work experiences, things like that. They just help to build yourself as like a well-rounded person. What are some tips you can give to first-year med students to balance school with research opportunities? It's really tough. I think if you're a first-year medical student, just finding a research opportunity, I think that's like a good place to start. So, school is tough, especially as you're getting going, and you should be doing your best to get acclimated to that, just to try to perform well in school, essentially. That being said, if you are like, I just want to get school down before I even start doing anything with research, I think you're probably missing out, because as anyone who's been involved in research know, the timeline to, from, hey, I want to do some research, to, hey, look at this thing I presented or published, it's like more on the order of like years as opposed to months or weeks. So if you say as a third-year medical student, like, oh, I think I want to do ortho, and you start doing research, then you might not have that much to show for it. So I would say, like, after the whole dizzying new medical school, as a first-year student, kind of feeling fades away, I'd reach out early, especially if your program has an ortho department. But even if they don't, a lot of places, like we work with medical students a lot, so you can reach out to us and say, hey, I'm interested in doing some research, we have stuff going on, so you don't have to be on site to help with that. But early is good, but don't do it at the cost, of your education, because performing well in school does matter more than research. What's the best time to ask for a letter of rec during a rotation? Yeah, seeming presumptuous activity. It is, yeah. So it's tough to ask at the beginning of your rotation, but you do have to ask early, because if someone knows you're looking for a letter of recommendation, then they're going to ask more questions to get to know you. So if you are working with them in the OR or in clinic, they may take a more personal interest in you, your learning, demonstrating your knowledge to them than they might otherwise have. But identifying those opportunities in advance is challenging. But what I did, and what I think is a pretty good idea, is on one of these rotations, identify someone that you are going to be working with for several days, like hopefully a full week. And I know a week is like, it seems such a short period of time for anyone to make any judgment to recommend like your character to a program, but that's, very common. That's what I did. But asking them at the end of this week to say, hey, can you write a letter of rec for me? Probably does you a little bit of a disservice, because then they might have done other things during the week that would have helped you by them getting to know you more, because most people are going to at least want to sit down with you, talk about your CV, your goals, things like that. So even though it is awkward to ask someone at the beginning of a rotation, I would do it like day one, like halfway through, end of the day, like, hey, just so you know, if it's okay with you, I would like to ask you if you think it's something you'd be willing to do, to write, a strong letter of recommendation on my behalf. And they might just say, I can't, it's just too tough, I don't know you that well. Or they might say, let's talk again at the end of the week or whatever, and we can probably work it out. That's great, you're in the door, and then you can, work your tail off and hopefully earn a really strong letter of rec during that time. So I think going early is still the way to go, even though it's kind of tough to do. Who to contact to set up phone virtual interviews? It's a great question. I think a good source would be your assigned like counselor or whatever they call it through the mods program. Every program will have, its program director, but also a coordinator generally, who does a lot of the administrative work for these residencies, the Army residencies. I have ours at the end of our presentation here that you can take down. But you usually email that administrator or the program director, because interviews are conducted essentially anytime between now and like the end of September, and then you in the programs submit your rank lists, mid-October. So you don't want to wait too long. But a lot of times you kind of just find open times that work. Like for instance, for our program director, she's like Friday afternoons. Friday afternoons are the time we do our interviews. And so like that's kind of what we work with. And then you kind of work with their availability to usually do a little Zoom session like this. What research opportunities or cultures are offered? Culture at William Beaumont, families getting together, how many cases do? So these are all good. These are good kind of specific questions tailored toward our program in particular, which we didn't hype up, necessarily on this. This was more kind of informational about applications, but we love to brag about our program. Our program is awesome. Our next actual webinar is going to be about our program. It'll be an open house. We'll actually have our chair and program director come in and introduce the program. So there'll be a little bit more then. It'll be in about a month's time. But so we have plenty of research opportunities. We have several people in the program who work with very high volume publishing kind of orthopedic scientists and run the supervisory level research projects where they can help guide anyone, junior residents, medical students, through research. And so we're pretty prolific. We participate in the military orthopedic surgeon society research meeting every year, and for the last 4 years in a row we've won the resident award for having the most research abstracts accepted at this meeting. So we do more research than any other military program, so there's a lot going on. And then as far as the culture at Beaumont, so we in our program, so we have 5 residents this year. We're a combined residency with Texas Tech, El Paso. And so there are 4 Army spots here, but actually there's a total of 5 residents total because there are folks on the Texas Tech side too. So we have actually a fairly large size program. It's 5 people, 5 years. So there's 25 residents. And so one of the perks of that is that there's a lot of people to hang out with. People live all over town and are super friendly. Families do get together. There are folks here with kids, families. There are a lot of folks who, are single or married or whatever. But yeah, people get together. I would say every weekend there's something going on. We work, a lot. So it's not always super common, but there are, organized kind of residency-wide events. And then oftentimes, yeah, people get together a lot here. It's really great, which is nice because you want to be around a supportive environment when you're stuck around these people for so long. And then how many cases? So this is kind of specific to our training in particular, which we'll get into the details kind of on our next chat. But so broadly speaking, case volume or case numbers are tracked, the number of surgeries you do during residency, and there's a certain minimum number you have to hit. Most people get, far beyond that. We pretty much cover that by the end of like your 3rd year, essentially. But in the last years, like graduating class, they all had over 2,500 cases, which is a hard number to really like gauge, but I think it was above the like 80th percentile of all ACGME accredited programs. So that's just our program. It's different everywhere, and it's different for every person based off your own experience and the docs you work with. But we do a lot of surgeries here, above average, and we do surgeries. Yeah, we're very.
I can touch on that a little bit, Cole, like case volume. So I'm Tony. I'm a PGY 4. So at the end of my PGY 3 year, I had just over or just under, I can't remember the exact number, 1,100 cases. The minimum number of total cases I think you need per the HCGME is like 1,500 or so. And the only thing I haven't met my minimum of specific case types on is I need 5 more spine cases for the rest of residency.
Yeah.
And I'm starting as a PGY 4, so it's pretty easy to get our numbers. We do operate, and we're definitely, like Cole said, well above the national average of case volume for our residencies.
Yeah. And that's kind of all I have. If you guys have anything you want to put in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and just ask whatever's on your minds, feel free to do so now. By all means, you don't have to, but we'll pretty much cover this here. I hope this was helpful. It can be confusing. I personally was very confused by the whole mods process. There weren't that many Army folks at my med school that I could commiserate with or ask for help. And so, it was a bit of a struggle, but going on your rotations, leaving good impressions, that matters like the most, and trying to figure out for yourself where you think you want to go, like the most important stuff. However, like all these paperwork, computer things, they're annoying and complicated sometimes, but just making sure you have the resources to take care of those things. It's extremely important, and you don't want to let some weird technical thing just completely throw off like your future. So I hope this kind of gave you if not a starting point, at least sort of a sounding board for things you're already going through, and was just helpful in thinking about not just doing well now, but think about the future. You work so hard on these audition rotations, you forget the chance that it's still going to be your choice. You do have agency in this process, and I think that's something you don't want to take for granted. It's a really, really big decision, and you should afford yourself that that power, because you do matter. You're trying to impress these people, sure, but this is still your future and education, and it's a very serious decision, and you should be given the tools to kind of maximize how you make that. So if anyone has anything else they want to add, feel free to do it now. Otherwise, these are some of the information of myself on the right. You can contact me any questions that you may have that come up later. And on the left, these are the contacts for our program in particular. So this is our program administrators contact information, as well as our program director's contact information. So what I would do if you're trying to set up an interview with us in the coming weeks, all those 3 emails that you see right there, just send an email to all 3 of those and say, hello, whatever, I would like to set up my interview at William Beaumont, and then pick a couple Fridays where you are free in the afternoon, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Another thing that I don't think we touched on, but like it's kind of an underrated thing for like picking your programs in the military, is remember that you do away rotations, and this may not matter to you. And I didn't realize that it mattered to me until I got into residency, and was incredibly pleased with like where our aways are. Like just location, if there's any networking you can do to leverage those away rotations while you're there, stuff like that. They're great opportunities to work with really good surgeons around the country, and then you also get to go temporarily live in some sweet spot, and a lot of times your family can come with you. So looking at like how like ease of like access and stuff for like your family if they want to come visit you while you're away on these like 10-week away rotations in our case.
Right. Yeah. Everywhere kind of has their different flavors, and you just want to match right, so you're not thinking too seriously about it. But these things add up that matter, and they make a difference and impact your life in residency. But yeah, Tony makes a good point. All right, guys. Well, if that's it, thanks so much for your time. I know everyone's busy this time of year, but look out if you are joining today. I'll send out a message probably in about 3 or 4 weeks. We'll do another one of these where it'll be a more formal thing, where we'll cover our program in particular, kind of the neat aspects that make us unique. And yeah, that'll be it. But feel free to reach out in the meantime if you have any questions about anything.